Today on the In All Kinds of Weather forecast, we talk about the consequences that Billy Napier continues to face for his losses on the field the past couple of years. Joe Hamilton leaving Florida for Texas A&M. On the bright side, though, Florida basketball and baseball are looking good, and we'll talk about that as well. This is the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. Welcome back to the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. I'm your host, Neil Schulman. You can follow me on Twitter at All Kinds Weather and on Instagram at All Kinds Weather Blog. Starting to be more active here on YouTube. More shows are coming. So if you haven't already done so, definitely be sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the like button, be sure to comment your thoughts on what we're discussing today as well. The crux of the episode today, Florida has lost Joe Hamilton to Texas A&M. The Gators do hire Dan Enos in an unrelated move. Joe Hamilton, though, is a massive departure for the Florida Gators. And as we just said the other day, we did that show before this news broke. So now we have to talk about this again. We'll make it different enough so that it's not just a repeat of that show. We'll talk about some different stuff. But again, another consequence that Billy Napier continues to pay for losing all those winnable games. And now it's a question of if he can survive it. And I mean, a real question, not just a rhetorical one. No, I mean a real question, a genuine question of if he can survive this. We'll also touch on the latest developments for Gator basketball and Gator baseball. But first, we're going to shout out our merch store. That slick new alligator logo that pays homage to all your favorite moments in Gator history is available on our merch. You can get it all by going to inallkindsofweather.com/merch. You can see the hat right here. We've got t-shirts, we've got polos, got workout tees, got one right here. Got to get myself right in preparation for those Mark Light Shakes this weekend in Coral Gables. We've got sweatshirts, we've got glasses, we've got koozies, anything you can think of. You name it, we've got merch for it. Go to inallkindsofweather.com/merch to get yours today. Quite a bit to discuss today. First, we'll shout out Gator basketball. It wasn't pretty, but the Gators did beat the Missouri Tigers. As Todd Golden said the other day, got to take care of business. The Gators have continually done that under Todd Golden. And one thing I have to say about Golden, to me, the biggest sign of growth in anyone, that's player, that's coach, that's an AD, that's a staffer, that's a human being, not sports related. The biggest sign of growth to me is to succeed where you've previously failed. So I'm not just talking about the fact that Golden's first team was the worst Gator basketball team since Billy Donovan's first couple of years, and that his second team is probably the best Florida team since that Final Four in 2014. I guess maybe you could say that stray Elite Eight team that Mike White had before John Igbunu went down, maybe that team was better, but to flip that script is an amazing feat. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that more specifically, Todd Golden in his first offseason missed on a lot of guys in the portal. He did keep Colin Castleton, which was good. Didn't have big man depth behind him. And that was because he missed on pretty much every single big man he went after. That's Norchad Omier, who went to Miami. That's Jonai Broome, who went to Auburn. That's a wealth of other guys that were also on Florida's board. But those two really hurt, missing on Omier and Jonai Broome. Florida had a front court in Colin Castleton consisting of one man. There was no depth behind him. And Golden paid the price for that. He paid the price for those recruiting misses well after the guys announced their new destinations. And if you're new here, put a pin in that. That's a theme. You'll be hearing that again. Golden paid for those recruiting losses game after game as his team was out-rebounded and didn't have any paint presence behind Colin Castleton. Obviously, Golden learned something from those failures. He went and he landed Tyrese Samuel from Seton Hall. He got Micah Hanlockton from Marshall. And those two big men have been critical for Florida this year in the front court. Also landing some guards, Zion Pullen from Riverside and Walter Clayton from Iona. And in contrast to last cycle, he's watching his recruiting wins pay off in spades every game, where his team owns the paint, or at the very least holds it to a point of neutral in the paint, owns the glass, or at the very least, again, holds its own and doesn't get completely dominated down low. And they can clean up a lot of their issues offensively by getting simple putbacks. Love to see that. Florida is probably out of the SEC title race. That home loss to Kentucky is really coming back to haunt them now in that aspect. Probably also cost them a seed line in the NCAA tournament. And obviously blowing that lead in College Station didn't help either, but you really have to win on your home floor if you want to win a conference title. That said, no real worries because Florida is clearly playing its best basketball right now. And while they're probably not going to be a top 4 seed, they're also very, very much likely to not be one of those teams you want to face in the round of 32 for one of those top 4 seeds. Florida could be a very dangerous 5, 6, or 7 seed. I just did my bracketology this morning. I have Florida as a 6 seed, which takes them out of Charlotte in UNC's pod. Actually, I can put that up on the screen right now. It's on Twitter. It's on Instagram. Eventually, I'll start putting it on the site, but I wanted to just put it out there on social media without having to put a link on it as well, so that you guys can see it more easily and know what I'm doing before I start putting it behind a link. But that's what it looks like. As you can see, I've got Florida as a 6 seed. I've got Florida going to Omaha to face Kansas. So in this case, jumping up from a 7 to a 6 did them no favors because that is a home game for Kansas. That's actually way worse than going to Charlotte and facing UNC or Duke. And Florida had to go there because of conference constraints. You can't put them in Auburn's pod. I guess I could have put them in Salt Lake City with Creighton, but that would disrupt a local matchup that would draw pretty well between Creighton and BYU. So Omaha was really the only place for me to put Florida, either as the 6th seed in Kansas's pod or as the 6th seed in Iowa State's pod. Both of those teams are 3 seeds. So, not ideal. But again, Florida is a team that you're not really going to want to see in the NCAA tournament because even when their shots aren't falling, they can rebound the basketball really well, get second chance opportunities, and that can white out a lot of your misses. So love what I'm seeing from Gator basketball. Also love what I'm seeing from Gator baseball. Bouncing back from a Tuesday loss to Stetson by beating up Bethune-Cookman pretty good. Big weekend series this week against Miami. I will be there. Hopefully get to see y'all there as well. Hopefully there's a lot of blue to disrupt that green out they're trying to do. Can't wait to try out one of those Mark Light shakes and hopefully see a Gator series win and continue that dominance over Miami. So football. There's good and bad. We'll start off with the more positive news, and then we'll get to the not so good stuff in a minute. As first reported by Jacob Rudner and 247 Sports, Florida is set to hire Dan Enos to an off-field position. That role is said to include a focus on scouting and head coach projects, whatever the hell that means. Anyway, Enos was last seen as the offensive coordinator for the Arkansas Razorbacks in 2023, a role that he was fired from 8 games into the season after the Hogs failed to reach the end zone against Mississippi State. That said, Enos does have a lot of success on his resume before that. He spent the previous 2 years as the OC at Maryland, the latter season of which the Terrapins ranked 4th in the Big Ten with 401.2 yards of total offense per game. In his first season in 2021 in Maryland, led by Tua Tagovailoa's younger brother, Taulia Tagovailoa, Maryland's offense set all kinds of program records. These included 5,740 yards of total offense, 3,960 yards of passing offense, and Tagovailoa personally broke the individual single season record with 3,860 passing yards. His prior stop was not so successful. Gator fans might remember him from the game in Orlando in 2019, where he was the offensive coordinator for a struggling Miami Hurricane offense under Manny Diaz. He was not invited back the ensuing season. But Enos, before that, did have success as the Arkansas OC in his first stint in Fayetteville from 2015 to 17. Arkansas, in those first 2 years, in 15 and 16, was one of just 2 FBS programs with a 3,000-yard passer and a 1,300-yard rusher in those 2 years. Enos is expected to serve in an off-field role for Florida. Florida has a new coordinator. They have promoted Russ Callaway to the role of offensive coordinator, not officially, but it's been reported by some pretty reputable people that that's going to happen. Florida also has a slew of new position coaches on the other side of the ball, including Gerald Chapman on the defensive line and Will Harris in the secondary. So obviously a lot of new faces in that coaching room for Florida. That's what I wrote on allkindweather.com. Full article on the site. I guess the analysis part of this to make a show of it, so I don't just read off my own words, I think it's a solid move. I don't hate it. He does have OC experience. Some of that is very unsuccessful experience, but nonetheless, not taking anything away from the fact that this is a veteran offensive play caller who's being added to Billy Napier's operation. Whether or not he is someone that I thought Florida would or should hire is another question, but I will also say that we as a fan base stomped our feet. We demanded change. We're getting it in some form. We're getting it. So sure, fair enough. Still yet to be determined how things are going to work with Russ Callaway as the co-OC. But again, to be fair, we demanded change, and in some form, we're getting it. I said the same thing about Joe Houston coming to work with Chris Couch on special teams. Fans have been decrying that as Houston just coming in to babysit Couch, and pretty noteworthy that neither of them are going to be on-field staffers. But again, it is something different. I can appreciate that. What I don't appreciate is the fact that all those boneheaded moves that Billy Napier made in the past couple of seasons took as long as they did to address, when it was clear beyond the point of debate that he had to do something about it long before he actually did, because Napier is still paying for those mistakes. And I know, I just did a show on this exact topic this week. So, Neil, why are you doing it again? That's all in the past. It's 2024 now. Stop harping on it. Move forward. Well, because now we have a new consequence of those same in-game mistakes that we have to talk about. And for those who missed that show, I'll summarize it quickly here. Because of a variety of stupid play calls, bad offensive line play that stemmed from years of suboptimal offensive line recruiting, bad special teams stemming from a lack of an on-field special teams coach, costing us games in the past, the situation in Gainesville is currently one where players and staffers alike just don't view us as an elite program. And thus, they're way more likely to jump ship for similar opportunities at other more prestigious programs. So for everyone out there who wants to know why I keep harping on those in-game deficiencies the past 2 years, you can hopefully just tell from that sigh. I'm tired of talking about it now. Why do I keep harping on it? Because they're canon. You can't get those games back. They're on Napier's permanent record, and he is continuing to deal with the fallout. Florida was 6-6 in 2022, and they were 5-7 in 2023. And that's just a fact. That's just the way it is. That is what it is. And the perception that comes from that is kind of out of Napier's control. What's in his control is those wins and those losses. But you know what? No, I had notes written down. I'll change them. I'll throw out the Vegas Bowl. I will discount it. I will throw it out the window, because bowl games are so meaningless these days. That was a skeleton team with all those opt-outs. Oregon State was playing for way more than we were. We had Jack Miller as our quarterback in that game. I will not hold that against Napier. So you know what? I will say 11-13. I will discard that game. I will strike it off Napier's record. Billy Napier is 11-13 at Florida. 6-6 in year 1, 5-7 in year 2. That means he has to go 7-5 in 2024 just to be 500 after 3 years in Gainesville. Just think about that. Just stop and settle with that and think that through. He has to go 7-5 this year just to not have an overall losing record in Gainesville after 3 years. And as we talked about the other day, won't go into that in too much more detail, but that's just not good enough. It's just not going to get the job done here. And that's not being a bad fan. That's just being objective and going, you know what? This is the history. 3 national titles, a very good claim at a 4th, 8 official SEC championships. You could claim 11. Florida had the best SEC team in 84, 85, and 90 with the best overall record in the SEC. Those titles aren't recognized because Florida did stuff that would have been just fine and dandy today, but that's neither here nor there. This is the history that Florida has. This is what Napier is doing. The two things don't match up. So no, that's just where we are. So why do I go into all this again? Well, because as I mentioned a second ago, those avoidable losses that Napier was responsible for continue to have new consequences. There was a reason for calling that Arkansas game a catastrophe that we will still find ourselves paying for years down the road. There was a reason for calling that FSU loss a completely avoidable, self-inflicted disaster that will likely mark the beginning of the program's unraveling. I'm hopeful that when I said likely, I'm going to turn out to be wrong, but there's a reason why I said those things, because now Florida has yet another consequence here. We've seen guys like Trevor Etienne leave the program, Princely Umanmielen leave the program. We've seen recruits decommit. We've seen Xavier Filsaime go to Texas, college football playoff team. Nasir Johnson go to Georgia, who's won the last two national titles before this past year. Amarius Williams has gone to Auburn. That one, not a great 2023 season for Auburn, but on the other hand, a proven winner in Hugh Freeze, who could plausibly sell that past success of his. So that's 2 5-stars and a 4-star. Also losing strength coach Craig Fitzgerald to Boston College, which I said the other day, I know he's close with Bill O'Brien there. And yet somehow, if Florida was a legitimate national title contender, somehow I don't think he leaves for the exact same job at a bottom tier ACC school with precisely zero past or zero future to sell in this new era of college football with all the realignment going on. And obviously, we now have a new staff, as I talked about a minute ago as well. Darnell Stapleton and Jay Bateman departing on their own, not even counting the guys we fired. I kind of think those guys were scapegoats for bad situations on defense, but nonetheless, you have Jay Bateman leave on his own accord for Texas A&M. And also, speaking of guys leaving for A&M, Jaden Hill, a pretty good defensive back we had. Scooby Williams, that one, he was a veteran. It was a veteran piece we had on our team. Not going to say he was an All-American, but it's an upperclassman linebacker. So depth, if nothing else, has departed for A&M. Speaking of A&M, taking our players, they failed in this aspect. We did get him, but A&M tried to get DJ Lagway. They put a lot of effort into it, and we had to put a lot more effort into holding on to him than we probably should have with the crown jewel of our class, who had been committed for over a full 365 days. A&M did try to poach him late, and Florida had to work for it. Would have been really nice if we could have instead spent that time working on other recruits because he was solid. But no, we had to keep exhausting a lot of time and effort into Lagway because other teams, frankly, took one look at our 5-7 record and all of a sudden decided that they had a real chance to go shopping in our recruiting class. And that is where we get to the main point of conversation tonight, because not only did Texas A&M take Scooby Williams, which, whatever, Jaden Hill, that one stings a little bit, and Jay Bateman, now they've taken our best off-field recruiter in Joe Hamilton. And if you're not familiar with the role that Joe Hamilton had with the Florida Gators, let me put it this way. Joe Hamilton was the Florida pipeline in the state of Texas. He really made an impact with recruits in the Lone Star State because he's from there. He played college ball at Texas Southern. He has all kinds of relationships with high school coaches throughout that state that helped curry favor with the Gators, that gave them an advantage to recruit their players. And even though Hamilton was a behind-the-scenes guy, he was everything in some guys' recruitments. Let me just submit a few pieces of evidence here. I am pulling them up. Give me 1 second. Probably should have had this ready to go beforehand, but whatever. Nonetheless, Joe Hamilton was a critical piece of Florida's recruiting process for a multitude of top players. Here he is being cited as a top reason for why DJ Lagway committed to Florida. Here is a quote from Xavier Filsaime, where he says, Joe Hamilton had a lot to do with why I chose to play for Florida. Now, yes, Xavier Filsaime decommitted and went to Texas, but the reason he committed in the first place was because he liked Joe Hamilton. Ostensibly, both of them left Florida, at least in part, due to those on-field losses. Here is a, now deleted tweet, but it is of him with Miles Graham, who he had a very good relationship with, going back to Miles Graham's time in Atlanta at Woodward. So that's just a small sampling of the impact that Joe Hamilton had with a variety of top Florida recruits. Again, he's not the guy that's going to have the position beside his name on the staff. He's not an on-field staffer, but this man was the glue that kept Florida's recruiting classes together. And he was especially, more specifically, the Texas recruiter for Florida. He's now gone. Texas A&M swooped in and took him away. And here is the additional consequence we have of Napier losing those games, especially to Arkansas, Utah, Kentucky, and FSU. Yes, I know Joe Hamilton is from the state of Texas. Yes, I realize Texas A&M is presumed to be paying him more than Florida was. Haven't seen that confirmed yet, but the rumors are pretty strongly indicating that he's getting a pay raise to go there. And yet, as was the case with Craig Fitzgerald, if Florida was 9-3 last year and thought to be a legitimate national title contender in 2024, hell, if they were 8-4 last year, I don't know that those guys leave Florida to take the exact same job at any other school unless they're offered a promotion, especially if that other school features a program with a first-year head coach, virtually no past football success or prestige to speak of or sell to recruits, and figure to continue to be at the bottom or near the bottom of their respective conferences again in 2024. But on the other hand, because Napier made those stupid play calls against FSU and Utah, because Napier had no on-field special teams coordinator, and thus the special teams unit committed fatal penalties against Kentucky, Utah, and Arkansas, because Napier and his staff's recruiting misses on the offensive line cost them that game against Kentucky, and probably a couple more that, I mean, Florida lost games because of other reasons, but the offensive line, had it been better, could have paved the way to a win. Florida was 5-7 because of all that and not 9-3. Yeah, I know Florida was a few plays away from 9-3. I know if Florida makes a few plays that they didn't make, maybe they're even 10-2, but they didn't. They didn't. As we said, game after game last year, good teams find ways to win games. Bad teams find ways to lose games. Play enough close games and sure, you're eventually bound to win one. And Florida did that against South Carolina. But by and large, Florida found ways to lose games. And that is why in the month of March now, we are not quite. We are a few hours away from the month of March. Napier is still playing whack-a-mole with his entire staff. So, bottom line, in isolation, any one of those moves that I just went through could have been understood and pardoned if Florida had won those games against Arkansas, FSU, Kentucky, and Utah last year. I didn't go into the defense. I know the defense was bad. Just a quick disclaimer. I know the defense was terrible the last couple of years. Napier also inherited an awful defense from Todd Grantham. Factor in a scheme change. You've got injuries like to Shamar James and to Cam Jackson. So yes, the defense was awful and it lost us games, but I'm just, to be very clear, I'm not blaming Napier for the defense's terrible performance. I'm not blaming him for the 4th and 17 against Missouri. That was Manny Nunnery's fault for just not dropping back in coverage. I don't blame him for the 702 yards we gave up to LSU because, again, the third coordinator in as many years, the key injuries on that side of the ball. Yes, the defense was awful. And sure, Napier's not completely without blame, but that was less avoidable than the offensive issues, the offensive line issues more specifically, and the special teams issues that lost Florida games last year. So again, bottom line, in isolation, any of those moves could have been understood or pardoned had Florida won those games against Arkansas, FSU, Kentucky, and Utah. Scooby Williams leaving. Okay, guy wants a fresh start. Fine, let him go. Miles Graham and Aaron Childs coming in. Shamar James will be healthy next year. Fine. Xavier Filsaime flipping to Texas. He's from that state. His high school coach has a tie to Austin now. Not happy about that. Probably doesn't even happen if Florida's 8-4, 9-3. But okay, fair enough. You can understand that. He wants to stay in his home state. That's about it. That's about where you go. Okay. If those two issues happen and you don't lose any of the other valuable pieces that we've just gone through, like with Craig Fitzgerald, or with Jaden Hill, or Trevor Etienne, or Princely Amon Mielen, or Jay Bateman, for that matter, If you just lose a couple of these guys, then it's just, well, new day and age of college football. The transfer portal is what it is. Guys are leaving schools left and right. I mean, every college looks like Grand Central Station now for one reason or another, right? Like everyone wants to play, everyone wants to star, everyone wants to win. So there's a lot of changing. And you could say that Florida is just a casualty of that and not the source of its own problem. But because of all those issues we just went through, that's where Florida is. So that's just the situation right now. Florida, as we said a couple days ago, Florida is in a spot right now that is not great. And it's because of what happened last fall. And I'll end the show the same way I ended the last one. And then that's by saying that I like Napier. I like Napier. I really, really do. I want him to work out for many different reasons. Number one, it's not my money, but I would prefer our boosters not have to pay $25.67 million to buy him out. Number two, I vouched for him, so I'd like to not look like a fool for declaring him to be my top choice to replace Dan Mullen. Number three, I really don't want to have to launch another coaching search. It would be the fifth one since the end of the 2010 season, which is unheard of. Number four, I think he is a good recruiter. He definitely needs help in the on-field, in-game department, but it's clear he can amass talent. And number five, I think he's a genuinely good person who does things the right way. I think his Gator Made program is great. I appreciate how he took the time to call the families of players and staffers during the hurricane in 2022 and make sure that they were okay. I think he takes a real interest in the players' academics, and he genuinely wants to see them excel in the classroom, as opposed to just making sure they can stay academically eligible. I think that's all great. I think that is awesome that he does that. It does count with me. I do think very highly of all that. It does matter. And I would feel really good about this program if the head coach of it, who won games on the field and had the Gators being what they're supposed to be, also did all these things off the field. But he's not in a good spot right now. He just cannot sustain any positive momentum, and that's all because of what happened on the field the last 2 years. And this is all temporary right now, because doesn't matter how bad the offseason is. You win 8 games next year, this all goes away. Nobody cares. Nobody even remembers all the things that happened this offseason. But that's what it's come to. It's about wins and losses now. It's not about the defensive line's win rate off the line of scrimmage. Nobody cares about that anymore. That was something that you could look at last year. If Florida went from 6-6 to 7-5, well, it's only one game. They're not really that much better. Yeah, but the defensive line's win rate was a lot better too. There are signs of progress to go along with it. Okay, fine. Now, no, nobody cares about that. All about wins and losses now. And to make this a little bit more positive, because I know I've been pretty bleak today, the entire theme I've talked about in the past 2 shows, how Napier is continuing to pay the consequences for his past mistakes, that's a two-way street. That can work the other way too. If Napier pulls a 9-3 season out of thin air, all of a sudden it'll be Florida who's the desirable program for players and staffers alike to want to leave their current programs to come join. The same way that it's now March, or again, we're hours away from the month of March starting, the same way that it's February 29th and Napier is still paying for his blunders over the past 2 years. You go 9-3 this year, even 8-4 this year, you'll be reaping the benefits of those on-field wins well into next offseason and beyond, as top recruits, hotshot assistants, and the people close to them all suddenly want to see them go be part of the University of Florida, because they will see the Gators as a more valuable place to take their talents. So, Billy, I'll close with this. Do that. Go do that. I'm rooting for you. I'm really, really pulling for you. You put yourself in a bad spot here, but it's not permanent. It is still reversible. So go do that. And it is my sincere hope that I don't have to do a third show on this exact topic because we lose other valuable pieces throughout this offseason. Hopefully, this is the end of the bleeding. You can patch up the final holes in your foundation and you can begin to build for a brighter future for the Gators in earnest. That is our show. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Tell all your friends. And while, yes, in all kinds of weather, we will all stick together, I feel as though I am speaking on behalf of a lot of Gator fans when I say that I truly hope we have some sunnier weather to talk about with the Gator football program soon.